Hey, Faith and Reason. All right, I'm almost done reading y'all's papers. I have to say, they were actually really good. Most of them were really good. And the ones that haven't been as good are mainly because I can kind of tell that some of y'all didn't actually read Mere Christianity. But to be honest with you, I'm kind of shocked that these papers are so good since I didn't get to kind of explain that style to y'all before we went into quarantine mode. But y'all did really good. I actually really like this style because I feel like I can grade it faster, but I also can see that y'all are actually thinking on both sides, and I think that's a lot of value. To be able to think what people who disagree with you think, to think like them for a moment, I think is very useful. So I'm almost done grading those. For those that I've got to so far, and I thought there were a few things missing in their paper, I've tried to email you so that there's no surprise when I submit the grades. And if you just do the few things I mentioned in the email, I'll boost your grade up to a 100 if you do it all, or close to a 100 if you do some of it. So you have an opportunity to easily make a 100 on this assignment. I'm trying not to grade too hard, but I do want to make sure that you mention Mere Christianity. That's probably been my most nitpicky thing so far. So I'm almost done with those. They should be, by the end of the day today, when you're watching this video, they should be all ready. What else do I have here? So our next topic, we're moving from proofs for God's existence into the next topic, which is kind of like a very simple topic, but also something that I find kind of like a lot of us struggle with. And the next topic is faith. I want to look for a good understanding of what we mean by faith, because it's interesting. This is kind of what Christianity especially hinges on. Do you have faith or not? And it's interesting, a lot of people debate the meaning of faith or the value of faith, if faith is against reason, is faith with reason. They have all these debates, but it's interesting, kind of like what I was saying about the definition of God. I don't think many of us have a clear definition of faith. And I think that especially goes for us Christians. I think a lot of Christians, what we say what we say faith is not what Jesus means by faith, is not what the Bible means by faith. It's not even what people who use the word faith in general mean by the word faith. A lot of the times we define faith as some kind of belief we have without any evidence, or despite any evidence. I've noticed that's kind of like the going definition that people tend to use: belief without evidence, or belief against evidence. And this seems summarized. I was listening to some atheist interviews, which I know is normal. But Richard Dawkins, who's kind of like the world's most famous atheist, he wrote the book The God Delusion. I've brought him up several times in class. Richard Dawkins was saying that he used to have a colleague who he worked with who was some kind of like biogeneticist, right? So this kind of high, deep level of science that I don't understand. And he said that what blew his mind about this biogeneticist that he worked with is that he was also a Christian. And so every Sunday he would go to church, and, he was really active in his church. And so Richard Dawkins said he confronted this guy and said, like, look, you're a brilliant scientist. How do you do all of this stuff with, genetics, but then go to church and pray to a God when you know that everything we believe in our science contradicts what you believe? And the guy apparently said to Richard Dawkins, like, look, I know it doesn't make sense. I know everything you're saying is right, but I have faith. I have faith, and that's why it's called faith. And so it's interesting, Richard Dawkins was presenting that as crazy. And, I have to admit, like, that is crazy. If that's what faith is, if faith is this belief I hold despite what reason tells me, despite what evidence tells me, despite what I know, then I would say ultimately that faith, if that's the case, is stupid. Like, it's dumb. And those of us who have faith, like, are maintaining a certain level of stupidity in our lives. And so I really think that we need to look at this concept of faith and see, is it really that? Is it belief without evidence? Is that what we mean by faith? When I say I believe in Jesus Christ, I mean, like, I believe in him even though there's no evidence, nothing like that. Clearly, I wouldn't use a word like stupid in faith if I thought that. I think there's something wrong with that definition. The other thing I want to say that I think is part of the problem when we're talking about faith as a culture is that a lot of times when we're talking about faith, we specifically seem to mean I have faith that God exists. And that's why I wanted to look at the proofs before we talked about the word faith. It's interesting, we're in a class, Faith and Reason. Originally, when I taught this class, I would do this section first. But I feel like it might be more useful to look at the proofs first, because I think it's useful, like, with things like the proofs, I think it shows that we don't necessarily have to have faith that there is a God, or even for those of you who don't fully buy the proofs. I know there are some of y'all who are more skeptical of the proofs, but at least that you see that there is some, most everybody that I've talked to or kind of pushed on this has said that they seem that at least, okay, there is something to these arguments. Even if they don't buy them fully, there is something there. So I think there's a part of the problem when we make faith all about whether or not I believe God exists. In Pope Francis recently gave this kind of, because of the whole COVID situation going on, he did this special prayer service thing called a Urbi et Orbi blessing. So it was kind of this not normal thing for the Pope to do at this time of the year. He usually only does it at Christmas, but it's this worldwide blessing. And he gave a homily during it, and he said this. He was quoting Jesus, who said, "Have you no faith?" And then he responds, this is in his homily, "Lord, you are calling us to faith, which is not so much believing that you exist, but coming to you and trusting in you." So this is from the Pope just recently, calling us to faith, which is not so much believing that you exist, but coming to you and trusting you. And I think part of the problem is, in our current world, we think of faith as solely in whether or not God exists, and I think that draws up a few problems for our definition. So we're moving into a section now where we're going to look at faith. And the first thing we're going to do, other than you watching this video where I'm introducing the topic, is, well, today I want you to think about, what is faith? How would you define faith? Is that how you would define faith? Belief without evidence? Is that what most of your friends who are Christian, if you're not, is that how they seem to believe it? Or think it is that? So I want you to think about faith. Also think about people in your life who have faith. Do you trust them? Do you respect them? Are they credible people? Things like that. And then I want you to get ready for tomorrow. We're going to read something from a priest. He's passed away now. His name is Father Luigi Giussani. He was a priest in the 1940s and 50s. He was very active. He died in 2004, but that's when he was kind of in his heyday of as a theologian. And he has this work on faith. I like to show this opening chapter. He's not a difficult read. He's not super academic. He did a lot of work with high schoolers, actually. Most of his work was with high schoolers. But what we're reading it's in a book, but it's from a talk he gave. And so he definitely, you can tell it's a speech, because he's a little bit throwing I'm learning as I'm trying to write, I'm trying to write things for future lessons for y'all. I'm learning I can't write like I talk. Well, this guy is just fully on, it's written as he talked. And so it might seem all over the place, but just try to keep in mind, he's giving a talk. But it introduces, I think, a more accurate view of faith. And there's a few things I disagree with him on, but I'll talk about that in a video on Wednesday. But so I want you to read that, and then just, I'll probably have a little worksheet or something that goes with it. I'll have to figure that out now. But watch that and see what you think. Kind of approach it with an open mind. Once again, there's no gotcha in this, right? We're just talking about what is the definition of faith, and then we can kind of maybe look at the proofs and look at faith and see where we go from there. So that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I've really enjoyed your papers. I'm going to try to get back to them soon. God bless.